That's okay. Alrighty.
Okay, good morning, everybody. As Melissa said, this is kind of a meaty topic. The one thing that I would kind of say, like I said at the first one, kind of sit back and try to absorb everything, but don't try to write everything down because you're going to get lost in the writing everything down and missing the next slides. Um, there's some things in here you may not actually have to deal with within your school, but I'm going to go over them anyway, like non-standard terms and things like that. So this is more like an awareness that that information is out there and where you can find it and things, but we'll go over it. But like I said, you don't have to dive in there and know everything by the time that you're done. Because we're talking about Pell, one of the things I always try to give people advice that, and not because I'm trying to be overstepping. It's just one of those things that these are things that helped me learn as I was in financial aid. And Melissa, I know you said yesterday you are a tree killer, so am I. But the one thing I would do is have your Pell chart somewhere near you. Like I have mine here. Just because it's easier to get a hold of that. And then if you write notes on it, it's right next to you. You can save it on your desktop, however you want to do it, whatever you're most comfortable with. So what we're going to do is we're going to start talking about Pell. And sorry, I've got 3 screens here, so I've got to remember which one I'm going fast forwarding. With the introduction of Pell, before we start doing that, I'm going to kind of recap what is Pell and what is the Iraq and Afghanistan service grant. So Pell, remember, we've talked about this, but kind of to reiterate, it's an entitlement. It's free money. Keep in mind that because it is an entitlement, you must award it. If the student is selected for verification, you need to verify before you can pay that. The other thing is to keep in mind that if a student is full-time, 3/4 time, half-time, less than half-time, you have to pay the student. So you don't want to not pay just because, well, they're less than half-time. It's an entitlement. You can't hold Pell for a supplement form. Remember that. The only thing you can hold it up for is verification. And Pell, just to reiterate, it's for undergraduate students without a bachelor's degree. So once a student gets a bachelor's degree, they're pretty much done with grants. There are some teaching exceptions out there. There's always an exception with financial aid. I think our favorite vocabulary word in financial aid, if you haven't learned it yet, it depends. That's our favorite phrase. It depends, because sometimes not everything is just as solid as you would think in this profession. If a student has an associate's degree, remember that's not a bachelor's degree. They still may have eligibility left. And a student can only receive Pell at one school. You will probably run into a student who's taking classes at 2 different schools and they want to be paid, but they only one school. That's called dual enrollment. Again, just to talk about the ISAG, again, most schools, you will not have a student who has this, but what that basically is, a student whose parent or guardian died as a result of U.S. military service in Iraq or Afghanistan after September 11th, 2001, or as a result of active service in the line of duty as a public safety officer. They may receive increased Title IV funds if at the time of the parent or guardian's death, if the student was less than 24 years old and enrolled in college. If the student is eligible for Pell, you award and package Title IV based on a 0 EFC. We're going to talk about that, but I want to kind of give you a recap of what these programs are. It helps when we're going into the meaty part of it. The Pell Grant, the ISAG eligibility. And this is one of those ones I said when I very first did the presentation, we all talk in acronyms because we trip over the long words. I'm tripping over the acronyms today. So one of the things we want to talk about here is the official 9-month expected family contribution is used when determining eligibility. And the IASG, that is subject to sequestration because it will reduce the amount of the grant. And I'm going to give you examples coming up. If you're not sure what sequestration is, if you've never heard of it, basically it's automatic spending cuts that occur through withdrawal of funding for certain programs. So the government will say, here's money, they will make cuts and they can take money back. So if you want to think about it that way, I'm big into the vocabulary thing. Sequestration is a word that you're going to hear even with loans and things like that. Again, the big thing to remember, you're probably going to have more Pell Grants than you are going to have IASG. Most likely, like I said the other day, we have at Pitt, we haven't even had an IASG at the Pittsburgh campus yet. So they're pretty rare. The other thing is you want to remember that these programs are based on enrollment. So you can have full-time, 3/4 time, half-time, or less than half-time. Based on 9-month EFC, we talked about this earlier on. Remember, there's 12 months in a year, 9 months is generally an academic year, or excuse me, basically the point that a student's in school. So if you think about September through May, it's 9 months, and then summer is the remaining 3 months. So if you kind of think about it in that way, it'll start to make a little bit more sense. Some vocabulary, just want to kind of talk about that, just so this starts to make a little bit more sense for you. And again, we've covered this in some of the other presentations. The scheduled award, it's the maximum grant amount, assuming the student is going to be enrolled full-time for the full year. There's year-round Pell, we'll talk about that. And that allows a student to receive 1.5 times the scheduled award in 1 year. So usually, and let me give you a little history lesson. In the past, it used to be if a student was eligible for a max Pell, or a Pell in general, they would get half in fall, half in spring. They were done for the academic year. So saying, I'm going to use this as an example where a school has a trailer. So an academic year is usually fall plus spring plus summer. Some schools will start their academic year with summer being a leader. So in the example of Pell, in the old days, it was if you went full-time in the fall, you went full-time in the spring, you didn't have eligibility in the summer. The Department of Ed brought back year-round Pell, which means the student can receive this now in fall, spring, and summer. So that's what year-round Pell means. They're taking it as long as the student is enrolled and they meet the criteria. So that's where they're saying they can get 1.5 times the amount of Pell grant. An annual award is the maximum amount a student would receive during a full academic year for a given enrollment. And it's based on your status, your EFC, your cost of attendance. And this is going to make a little bit more sense, hopefully, when we start looking at the Pell chart and things like that. Okay, we're going to talk about the Children of Fallen Heroes Scholarship. And basically that the student has to meet all eligibility criteria for Pell. The parent or guardian died in the line of duty as a public safety officer. The student was age 23 or younger or enrolled in college. And it ensures that a student receives the maximum Pell grant. So basically we want to make sure that these students, they have to meet all the criteria for Pell. And they want to make sure the student receives Pell, but they may not have an EFC that allows that. If you want more information about this, there is an electronic announcement. It's dated 11/19/2018. The reason it's dated 2018 is because the program started during the 18-19 academic year. Schools must use a 0 EFC to package federal financial aid if the student is Pell eligible. So remember that. You're going to use a 0 EFC for packaging purpose, but don't change the EFC on the ICER, okay? That gets a little bit confusing. So you're giving the benefit of the doubt and packaging them as they do have a 0 EFC, but you're not going to change it. This is basically where it gets a little bit meaty. This is reading the Pell charts. So when you look at this, I'm going to kind of give you some ideas how to make this a little bit easier. So when you look at the paper Pell chart, it looks like this, and it's 16 pages long. There's a couple things you really want to look at right out of the gate. So the first thing you want to look at, the Pell charts will be written for full-time, 3/4 time, half-time, less than half-time. Make sure when you're looking at these, they're in the right, you're looking at the right chart basically. If you're programming them into a system, make sure whoever's programming is programming them into the correct system as well. The other things to look at, little box over here, cost of attendance. So cost of attendance is basically what your school uses. I believe everybody here is probably on that last band. If your cost of attendance is over the $64.95, which is your max Pell, you're going to be on the very last band of this Pell chart. So down here, if you can see my cursor, I assume the majority of us are going to be using that last band. The one thing I always stress, make sure that you're looking at the correct Pell chart. You're probably going to have Pell charts, multiple Pell charts sitting on your desk because you're finishing out one year and starting a new one. So you could have two of them sitting there. What I try to do is get a highlighter and just kind of highlight what I'm looking at just so I don't mix them up. The other thing is on the Pell chart, it'll have the maximum in the upper right-hand corner. So basically what we're doing here, and I'll just give you a quick and dirty way of reading these if you're not familiar. So I'm going to use the example for my school. We have our cost of attendance is over the $64.95. So we're in the last band on the bottom here. What you would do, you're looking at the cost of attendance. Now say that we have a student who has a 0 EFC. We just take this 0, follow that all the way down to the bottom here, and it's $64.95. Now, the reason that you're looking at the full time, you're thinking, how'd you get $64.95 and the top of this thing here is 14? There's multiple pages for full-time students. So just remember that. But basically 0 EFC, follow it all the way down, $64.95, that student's eligible for the max Pell Grant. If you have a student who has a, let's say 801 EFC, you're same thing, you're gonna follow this all the way down, they're eligible for the $64.45. So basically you're just matching the EFC, cost of attendance, matching them up, and that's how you determine the EFC from a Pell chart. This is probably not in the PowerPoint that was sent. I added this last night. It was something I forgot I had when we were doing training here. And basically what it is, and you can use this, if you don't want to use it, pitch it. You're not going to hurt my feelings with it. So basically I just kind of color coded some things just to help somebody I was training on how to read a Pell chart. Now, the one thing that I say is make sure you're on the right year. I just pulled out the one I used last year. So this isn't the right Pell chart. So right out of the gate, this was a cheat sheet that I hadn't updated. But basically, if you look at it, if you look at the first thing, you want to make sure that you're using the right year. So if you look at the blue arrow here, just look right here. It's going to tell you the year, and they are available every year. So you're going to pull down new Pell charts every year. Use the chart for the correct enrollment. So remember, you're going to see full-time, you'll see 3/4 time, half-time, less than half-time. So keep an eye on that. So you want to make sure you're using the right page. Look at the cost of attendance. That's the green arrow and that little teeny tiny writing that says cost of attendance in there. And again, like I said, if your cost of attendance is more than the maximum Pell, you're going to be on the bottom band on here. And then find the band that's appropriate for you. So this gray arrow, that was just saying, this is our band that we use. Always look at that spot. So this is kind of one of those, we want to make sure that you know exactly what you're looking at. Make sure that you're not on the wrong Pell chart. Like I said, if you want it, you can use it. If you don't, you can pitch it. The other thing that I added in here, you can create your own Pell chart. Just make sure, have somebody double, triple check it for accuracy. But basically, this is something we use here. I did give this to Melissa, and if you want to use it, you can. The nice thing about this is an example only, but this is where networking becomes really cool. You can call somebody up where you know who does this and say, hey, do you still have that done? Do you want to share it with us? And basically what it is this. Remember I told you we use the last band? So there's pages we don't even look at. And what this does, this makes it the quick and easy way to read this. So the same thing, if the student has a 0 EFC, we know they're eligible for $64.95, which was on the bottom of that Pell chart. This breaks it up by semester. So we have a fall and spring semester. There's half and half of the $64.95. If you go over 3/4 time, student would be eligible for $48.71. Same thing. We just break it up, fall semester, spring semester, and we go over half time and less than half time. So if you want to do something like that, you can. I just took a snippet of it, but it does make it a little bit easier for you to read. and a little quicker for you. So I don't know about you, but the older I'm getting, the harder that Pell chart's getting to read. So we have to get a little magnifier on here to start looking at these. To continue to go on, there's factors that impact the grant amounts, and we kind of talked about these, but throughout the week and even today. So the student's 9-month EFC, remember that that's what we're using. It's going to be right on the student aid report. An academic year, remember that we're looking at fall, spring, and summer. This is done for a 9-month EFC. Enrollment status, what you want to remember there is what I've said with full-time, 3/4 time, half-time, less than half-time. So the enrollment status will affect the Pell. The cost of attendance, and cost of attendance, remember which band you're looking at. So that's going to affect the amount of, or the cost of the amount of Pell you're going to get. Cost of attendance, again, we've talked about that a lot, but that's tuition, fees, room, board, book, supplies, miscellaneous, travel, the whole gambit. So cost of attendance is more than just tuition and fees. We're going to talk about the payment periods coming up here. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about, the big blue box over here that says 5 formulas. I'm going to tell you what the 5 formulas are, but here's the good part about this. There's probably only one you're going to use. There might be a couple additional, but really you're probably going to be using the Formula 1. Let me just kind of read these through. They are in the handbook, but like I said, they're not listed on here because you're probably going to use the first one. Formula 1 is for a credit hour term-based program. The program must meet one of 2 sets of requirements. For the program with a traditional academic calendar, it must have an academic calendar that consists of fall through spring, 2 semesters or trimesters or 3/4. So basically, most of us are 2 semesters. So this would be Formula 1. Formula 2 is going to be, you can maybe use for programs that will qualify for Formula 1, except the program's academic calendar is less than 30 weeks. So I don't think anybody here has less than 30 weeks. So again, you're probably in Formula 1. Formula 3, any term-based program may use this formula for Pell calculations, but you must use this formula for a term-based program that does not qualify for Formula 1 and 2 and that uses non-standard terms. So non-standard terms, most of us don't have that. So the big takeaway, Formula 2, less than 30 weeks, Formula 3, non-standard terms. So that's why I'm showing you how you're kind of pulling yourself out of these. Formula 4 is used for clock hour schools only. So unless you're a clock hour school, you're not going to be using Formula 4, and Formula 5 is for correspondence study. So if you think about it, most of us are going to be in Formula 1. Again, the thing is, I always like to make sure everybody is aware of these. So in case you do run into these at some point in time, we can tell you where to find them and basically give you a little bit of an overview. But this isn't something that you're going to need to know, you know, on a daily basis. The IASG criteria, again, you meet all the criteria for Pell except EFC. So that's the important line on there. You meet all the eligibility criteria for Pell except EFC. So EFC is the one time they take that out of there. So basically you can still get this grant, but you don't have to have the Pell eligibility criteria. A parent or guardian, again, has died as a result of military service in Iraq or Afghanistan. Student was 23 or younger and enrolled in college. Department of Defense database match will show up on an ICER. So basically, when we were talking about C codes the other day, this will pop up. So that's how you know if their students could be eligible. And they are exempt for verification. The one thing I can stress here, not all of you guys will ever see this. So just keep in mind, I'm telling you about it, but you may not have students at your school that are eligible for this. The Pell Grant and IASG eligibility, I wanted to give you an example of this because remember when I first started this presentation, I talked about sequestration. They're cuts that occur through withdrawal of certain programs. So the feds can come in and basically say, give it and I take it away. So they can reduce some things. with a Pell Grant, they are exempt from sequestration. You're not going to ever decrease, the amount of Pell is never going to be decreased, but with IASG, it can be, and it is. So basically this little handy dandy chart, and if you do have a student, you may want to hold on to this. If a student is full-time and say that if they're eligible for Pell, $64.95, they get it, that's it. But if they're eligible for ISG, there is a portion that's taken off of that award. Now, this is a pretty, I mean, it's pretty important, but again, you may not have these students. The thing you want to do is you want to make sure if you do have these, you do them correctly. And basically what it is 5.7% is removed from that award amount. So in this case, let's look at full-time. $64.95 is the amount. You're going to figure out basically what is 5.7% of that grant, and it's going to be $370.21. Now, the one thing you want to remember is you want to read these little notes down here. Cents can be applied to some programs differently than others in the with the Department of Education. In this situation, cents are rounded down. A lot of times when you're looking at something, if something is 99 cents, you automatically round it up, right? Not in this program, you round down. So you want to remember that. So in this case, the $64.95, you take away the $370, you're rounding down. So the new amount is $61.24. So one of the things you want to remember, round down with this program if you actually have it. So it's telling you that the COD system has it, but they want you to round down. Our system, and I believe we don't even deal with the cents in there. Keep in mind too, there's full-time, three-quarters time, half-time, less than half-time. So a student with their enrollment can be eligible for this program, but IASG only, not Pell, is affected by the sequestration reduction, okay? And they can actually change the amounts in certain times, certain dates. So if you look up here, calculation first dispersed, you have to look at these dates as well. But again, I don't want to belabor this because most of you will never have it, but I want to make sure that you are aware that that is part of the packaging of this particular program in case you do. Academic year definition, this is a biggie. Again, most of us don't have clock hours, so you're really looking at the program type. It's going to be in credit hours. You have to have a minimum of 30 weeks in a credit hour program, and minimum hours is going to be the 24 semesters or trimesters or 36 quarters. Now, the one thing to take away from here, this is the minimum. A school can have more than this. For clock hours, if there's any way from clock hours, it's 26 and then 900 hours. Okay, so most of you, again, like I said, you're probably going to be in these credit hours. Again, 30 weeks. If you look at this, divided into two, you're going to be 15 for each week. You have the 15 for each semester. Let's talk about defining terms, and this is an academic year. So Title IV definition can differ from the school's academic calendar. Keep that in mind. Like I said, there's a minimum of 30 weeks and 24 credits, but you can have higher than that. So the examples are kind of here. So you have, this is your minimum. You can have higher than that. Let me give you an example, kind of, hopefully this will make it a little bit more clear. I'm going to use my school for an example that when a student comes in and they're charged, they can take between 12 and 18 credits and be charged the same amount. So obviously if you have more credits, you want to get more bang for your buck, right? So it could be higher than the number of credits in a calendar year, or it could be more weeks in a calendar year. But as long as you hit the minimum, which most likely your registrar or whoever setting up your calendar is going to make sure you do anyway. So defining some terms, we're going to go through all of these coming up here. So there's a slide for each of these, and we're going to explain the important terms. The other thing is too, when I was talking on Monday, do you remember I said we talk in acronyms? This is one of those things that, especially something like LEU, you just want to know what it means. It's pretty important that if you're sitting in a conference like this or you're talking to somebody in the financial aid world, that you just know exactly, what is being covered. So let's talk about scheduled award. The scheduled award is the maximum amount for full-time enrollment for a full academic year. Again, it's based on your cost of attendance, your EFC. The Pell Grant, you want to refer to those schedules. So you remember when we were talking about full-time, three-quarters time, half-time, less than half-time, and the EFC, that's how you're determining who's eligible. And IASG, the Pell Grant amount, remember, it's reduced by sequestration. So remember that chart that we just went over in that 5.7. So if you do have one of those, you do have to reduce the amount. Okay, LEU, this is an interesting one. And basically it used to be there was no real cap on Pell Grants. And I don't know if people still refer to Pell jumpers, but there were students who would like to stay in school forever and they could get quite a bit of Pell. So just kept going, you know, they would receive Pell, they would switch majors, they would keep, you know, basically the professional student. Excuse me, the Department of Education finally said, nope, we can't do this anymore. We're going to cap the Pell Grant program. So if you look at the LEU, think about it as kind of a cap. It's a little bit different. So all programs are not going to behave the exact same way. So a maximum lifetime eligibility usage, and that's what LEU stands for, lifetime eligibility usage for a student is basically 600%. To make it easy, think about it this way. 100% is an academic year, right? So freshman year, there's your 100%, sophomore year, 200%, junior year, 300%, senior year, 400%. Students are usually done, right? But not all students end after 4 years. Some students may transfer, they may lose credits, and then they have to maybe change in a program. So this basically is allowing a student to have 6 years of Pell. So if you want to think about it that way, it makes it a little bit easier to understand. So I don't want to confuse you, but I'm going to throw FIA state grant in there because they're very different and they're very easy to confuse. The Pennsylvania state grant will give you 4 years, 8 semesters, you're done, right? Pell Grant, federal, different rules, they're going to give you up to 6 years. Think about it that way. Don't confuse the two. They're very easy to confuse, but you just want to make sure that state, federal will differ. So state can cut you off, federal, they give you a little bit more grace. You basically want to look at, with these, usually if a student is full-time all the way through, it's going to be easy because you're looking at those 100%. If you are looking at a student who is part-time, 3/4 times, you might have to do some calculations. You can look up on COD to see what percentage a student is at. So you can see this. It's also on NSLDS. You can see the percentage of what a student has used. Now here's a little interesting thing. If a student has gotten to their senior year and say that they only have, they're up to 550% or 599%, you still have to calculate what is remaining and give it to that student. So the example in the federal handbook was like $12. They're still eligible for it, so you still have to give it to them. So remember I was telling you it is a entitlement, you still have to give that Pell. So sometimes you will have to calculate these out. So I just want to kind of throw that out there. You're not going to have probably a ton of them, but you'll see them. Every once in a while we have one that comes up that's you know, an odd amount, but you will have to take a look at it and calculate it. And if you run into those, reach out if you've never done them and we can help you out with them. Okay, defining terms, payment schedules, and disbursement schedules. The payment schedule is the amount for various 9-month EFCs at different costs of attendances. Full-time in term-based credit hour program, all clock hours and non-term credit terms. Disbursement schedule, it's the amounts for less than full-time enrollment. These are term-based credit hour programs, non-residential portions, correspondence programs. Again, this is one of those ones that there's no correspondence classes, schools here, or non-standard, you kind of get to ignore that. If you look at the Pell chart, you're going to see how it's broken down again. Like I keep saying, make sure that you're looking at the correct one, full-time, 3/4, you know, make sure you're on the right one and make sure you're looking at the correct EFC. An annual award, the maximum amount for a full-time academic year, may be less than the scheduled award if less than half-time. So we've kind of talked about that. Defining enrollment status. Schools establish the enrollment status standards for their programs. So you basically establish them, and then you find out basically how the financial aid fits, if you want to look at it that way. You must meet or exceed the regulatory minimum. So remember that, so I was using an example of 34 weeks and 24 semesters. You can be higher than that. You could have 32 weeks and 30 credits, but you have to at least hit the minimum criteria. You have to apply this consistently. So consistency across the school is a pretty big deal. You can't just go rogue on any of these federal programs. The Title IV definition may differ from the academic definition, and repeat coursework in a term-based program can affect Title IV enrollment status. And basically we're talking about, you can't keep taking classes over and over again and expect the programs to continue to pay for those. Okay, this is one of the pages that I would say, if you're not familiar with it, maybe copy this and leave this at your desk, okay? Because when we're going over the different formulas, remember I said that we're basically all standard terms. I don't think there's any correspondence or clock hour folks here. So this standard term, this is what you're gonna hone in on. When I start talking about non-standard, I'm gonna kind of give you permission to just sit back and look because you're probably not going to be using a lot of that. But the standard term for credit hour programs, what they're saying here, a full-time student has to be enrolled at least 12 or more credits. So a student could be taking 18 credits and still get a full Pell Grant, but they have to be at least minimum of 12. 3/4 time, it's 9 credits. It's really 9, 10, and 11 if you look at it that way. Halftime, 6 credits, minimum 6 credits. Or halftime, it's really 6, 7, and 8, if you think about that, because 9's going to throw you over your 3/4 time. And then anything under 6 credits is going to be your less than halftime, folks. And keep in mind, like I said, if a student is less than halftime, you still have to pay them Pell. It's one of the few programs that will give you aid for being less than halftime. So don't just forget about them and take them out of the realm of things. They may not be eligible for direct loans or something like that, but Pell is the exception to the rule. So again, this one, I would say if you have this chart, you can cut it out, put it in, like I love Grace's binder idea. I used to do that, or just put a copy somewhere next to you. What I'm going to do here, we're going to talk about non-standard times. And this is what I said about the non-standard. You're probably not going to use this a whole lot, but what I want to do is I want to at least give you the how to calculate these. So will you ever use this? Maybe, maybe not, but let's just talk about it, and that way you know where it's at. Let's talk about what a non-standard term is first. So non-standard terms, they are not, excuse me, non-standard are terms that are not a semester. An example, they could be a 5-week term or a 23-week term. But it's non-standard, like what the definition that I gave you before. Clock hours, they're always non-standard. They're courses that do not begin or end with a set period of time. These courses, they can overlap. So they don't have specific end and start and end dates. They can actually overlap each other. Sequential courses that do not begin and end with a specific term. So that's basically the definition of a non-standard term. So I want to at least tell you what this was. We're going to probably go through this pretty quickly, but I want to talk about the steps. So there's non-standard terms for credit hour programs. And basically what they're going to do, and I'm going to have examples on the next page, it's going to tell you, but basically what they're saying is if you do have these, step 1, you multiply the credit hours in an academic year by the weeks of instructional time in a non-standard term, that's step 1. And then step 2, you divide the step 1 result by weeks of instruction time in an academic year, and always round up. So remember when they're telling you to round up, make sure if it's round up or round down. So I was telling you about how not every program, just don't get in your head, everything rounds up or everything rounds down. You have to be looking at these specifically. So let's look at an example. So this is calculating a full-time status. So the academic year for a non-standard term program is 34 weeks and 28 credits. In this case, term 1 and 4 are 10 weeks. So what they're doing is they're saying 28 semester credit hours. So you're taking your credit hours, you're timesing it by the 10 weeks here, you'll get 280. You divide by the weeks in the program, so there's 34, and this is going to equal 9 semester credit hours. Now, when you look at this one, it actually comes up to 8.23. So you want to remember you round up to the next on this one. So that's going to give you 9 credits. So basically, remember, it's important to round up or round down because that's a difference between, you know, you want to look at the whole numbers where they're going with that. Like I said, I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. Let's calculate a part-time status. Academic year, 34 weeks and 28 credits. Terms 1 and 4 equals 10 weeks. Full-time is 9 credits. So what is the student's term 1 enrollment status? If he enrolls for 5 credits, you take the 5 credits, divide it over the 9 credits, 56% is going to give you half time. Like I said, you're probably not going to use these. Calculating full-time status, same thing. You want to look at there's the 34 weeks, the 28 credits, the terms, the total amount of weeks, and then you're going through basically same criteria. Remember to round, okay? So round up to the next full number. And by the way, I'm going to give you a little bit of a sigh of relief. This is not on a quiz, okay? Again, same thing with the part-time status. Basically, you just want to remember when we went through that first calculation, you're basically just plugging in the numbers, the 34 weeks, the credits. So basically, they're telling you how to get to the bottom number here. So like I said, that non-standard terms, you guys don't have non-standard terms. I won't stress too much about that. Let's get into defining enrollment status. So when you're looking here, the enrollment status, and I can't stress this enough, you want to remember there's full-time, 3/4 time, half-time, less than half-time. For clock hours, remember in non-term, like I said, we don't use these. You're going to use only the full-time payment schedule. The clock hour programs full-time is 24 clock hours per week. So that's going to tell you your definition on who uses the full-time. 3/4 time, you're going to use the full-time payment schedule. Half-time, use the full-time payment schedule, and less than half-time. So they're going to be basically telling you if you are in a non-standard term, what to use. Defining terms for enrollment status in the correspondence program. Like I said, I'm just going to go through these. We don't have correspondence programs here. It's never more than half-time enrollment solely in a correspondence program or non-residential component. So basically, that's the correspondence program. Like I said, there's a lot of formulas. You're going to be in the one. So the one that we looked at, let's go all the way back. There you go. That's the one that you really want to hone in on. So if you pull this out, then you're probably going to be in good. You can just look at it, look at the number of credits and move on from there. If you are non-standard, I can tell you, I don't work with non-standard terms. I don't work with correspondence or clock hours. So if you do have those, you do run into them, just reach out to somebody. We can find you the people who are know this like the back of their hand. I don't do it enough to know that I can say I know this 110%, and I'm not going to pretend I do either.
That's a great point, Jan. If anybody does deal with clock hours, let me know, and I can reach out to or non-standard terms. I can reach out to pastoral council and get a contact person for you to help with that. We definitely have resources, and financial aid people like to help. So good point. Thanks, Jan.
Sure. Okay, so we have a quiz right out of the gate. And I think that after talking all about that stuff, this is a really easy question. So I really like this question coming in here. So the question is, Ed publishes federal Pell Grant payment and disbursement schedules for every year. And you can throw that in the chat if you want. I don't know if I'm going to be able to see the chat is the only problem.
True, true, true.
And the answer is true. So good job. Okay, then we have another quiz. And this quiz is students must have an EFC that is Pell Grant eligible to receive the IASG grant. You can throw that in the quiz. Is that true or false?
False, 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 false. That's false.
Yep, so that is true. So you need to meet all the eligibility criteria for Pell except EFC. There's the exception to the rule there. So we're going to go kind of back into talking about Pell with cost of attendance. Cost of attendance components for Pell and the IASG are identical to all other Title IV programs, always based on full-time costs in a full-time year. Basic and additional components, and then restrictions. There are some restrictions on less than half-time enrollment, incarcerated students, correspondence programs, and programs longer or shorter than an academic year. We talked about that, as most of you guys are not going to have that. Remember, cost of attendance, tuition fees, room, board, book supplies, travel, miscellaneous. So cost of attendance, I think that's one of those ones you walk away with never not knowing what it is, because we've said it so many times. But the good thing is you should remember it's not just tuition and fees. And that's one of those things that it's helpful to know all the components to that, because when a parent or a family comes in and they say cost of attendance, what is that? You can explain it to them. There's a little bit more that you can borrow for, travel and things like that if they want to get into that point of it. Here's something I did want to bring up. If a student's COA changes, the student's cost of attendance changes during an award year and the enrollment remains the same, you can, but you're not required to recalculate the Pell. So, just keep that in mind. If you do decide to do that, you have to document it. That's the other thing that was brought up in the last couple of days. Document, document, document. It's basically like you're telling a little story. A lot of it is because you're going to deal with so many students that you want to make sure that you remember what the conversation was. Basically financial aid can be pretty confusing. So the nice thing about that is if you write down what you told somebody and they come back and say, you said this, and you're like, I don't think I did, then you can go, oh, okay. And you can figure out where the confusion came in. Because with dealing with the multiple number of students that you're not going to remember every conversation. So that's just one of those things that, documenting is going to be your friend. So cost of attendance proration, we're just going to again show you how to do this. You don't have to do that, but if you do, you have to document it. So we're just going to basically show you how to do it. So there's two methods on there. So method one, and this is one of the things that you want to make sure that you keep an eye on. Make sure you realize that you've got the time signs, you got the ors, you got to pay attention to those. So method one, again, this is cost of attendance proration. You take the weeks of instructional time in a program's academic year, you divide it over the weeks of instructional time to which costs apply, and then you times it by full-time costs. That's there. Or you take the hours, if you're a clock hours in a program's academic year, divide by hours to which costs apply, and then times it by full-time costs. So remember, there's the or there. That's one of the things that when I was looking at this initially, I'm like, oh, forgot about that. There's the second method. It's multiply the full-time costs. So this would be with room and board. So weeks of instructional time in a program's academic year, divided by weeks of instructional time to which costs apply, times room, board, transportation, miscellaneous, personal expenses, and dependent care. So remember, that's going to be the other items besides your tuition fees. Keep in mind too, there's a plus sign there. So when you're writing these out, if you're using this like a little cheat sheet that you have set up, that you set it up correctly. This is the hours in a program's academic year over or divided by hours to which costs apply times the tuition fees, book supplies, and loan fees. So that is going to be your method 2 on there. And again, these are in the handbook too, if you really want to look at that or reach out to somebody who's actually, does these quite a bit. We want to talk about the payment period. Payment period is interval to which each portion of a grant payment is assigned. So remember, when somebody's eligible, if they're for an academic year, eligible for the $6,000, you can't just give it to them all in September. You have to split those. So in a semester, it's usually split half for fall, half for spring. So that's what they're saying, interval to which each portion of the grant is assigned. In a term-based credit hour, it's always the term, clock hour, and non-term credit hour. If shorter or equal to the academic year, half of the hours and half of the weeks. Longer an academic year, the remaining period is handled differently. Biggest thing to take away from this is just remember that you can't give like the full amount up front. You split them up for each semester. So you set up the payment period within your school. And usually it's basically in your dispersing aid, you're basically paying everything kind of at the same time. So your payment periods are set up. Now, overlapping term, this is going to be a non-standard. Overlapping terms defined as a new beginning from the beginning end of the previous term. So this would be if you're in a program that basically classes will start at one point and they're not over yet, and another set of classes are starting, you're overlapping your enrollment. Exceptions for certain programs offered exclusively in semesters, trimesters, or quarters. And then we're going to give you another quiz. The definition of a payment period is the same for all program structures. So does a payment period, is it the same for all payment structures? So is it the same for an overlapping program that it is for a standard program? Think about it that way. And I can't see the chat, but if somebody could tell me what the answers are coming up.
Lots of false.
You're correct. The
False,
answer
false,
is
false, false.
And the answer is definitely false. Okay, steps to calculate a federal Pell Grant or ISAG. This is something that you may want to pull this one out and just kind of keep handy, just so you know how to do it. You determine the enrollment status. Remember, full-time, part-time, 3/4 time. You calculate the federal Pell Grant or the IASG cost of attendance, that's your cost of COA. Determine the annual award, determine the payment periods, and then calculate the payments for each payment period. So even one of the things too, for the calculating payments, you could have a student who's full-time and 3/4 time. So obviously remember, the full-time is going to be when they're full-time enrolled, the 3/4 time when they're taking 9 credits. So if you want to think about it that way as well. Formula 1, programs that measure progress in credit hours uses standard terms. This is what most of us are using. They do not include overlapping terms. Define full-time enrollment at least 12 credits. So that's pretty much where most of our definitions are going to be. The payment period is the term, and you may distribute Pell or IASG across all terms and certain restrictions. So I'm going to kind of leave it here because Jared's going to pick this up for me because we're splitting Pell. And the good thing about that is because I am starting to lose my voice. So that's my disclaimer on that. I'm going to probably pull mine down and stop sharing. And I'm going to allow Jared to jump in there and take over for me.
Everyone see that okay? All right, perfect. All right. So first slide, a lot of the stuff, that Janet went over, I have a lot of activities and different things we're going to do. So we're going to get a little bit more interaction with everyone. We know we threw a lot of content at you in this first part, so there is some things we're going to go into a little bit more depth with all the different formulas, just so you have a general overview. Again, as Janet said, for us, we don't really use all of them. I think that's the bigger thing to really understand, and don't get too overwhelmed with it. It's not, these are out there, because there's so many different schools that have so many different offerings. And that's why we have to make sure, that we're at least letting because if you change schools and different things like that, when we at least, again, you have the baseline, to kind of go from there. So starting with the first one, if you guys just want to kind of use the chat, Once you have determined the appropriate formula for a program, you must use it to calculate amounts for all students enrolled in the program and for all terms in that award year. Is that true or false? Job. Job.
A lot of truths. Yep.
Yep. Good. Good job, everyone. Yep, the answer is true. So good job. All right. So the next we're going to go right into a learning activity, and this is going to be based off of just what Janet talked about really quick with Formula One. This is just really a reference slide here. So if you guys, I know that a lot of this, we go through it and we throw so much content at you, in such a little bit amount of time. This is just giving you a little bit of reference to go back to this and to have a little bit more of the understanding. I know that Melissa talked to you guys and said to you guys, we'll be getting the self-study guides and that's where a lot of this information you can go back to, and kind of see it again. But if you need to, this is the slide just to reference back to this activity that we're going to go through right now. So we have Allison is in her second year student enrolled in 2-year associate degree program. 1 year includes 2 15-week semesters with the option of a 10-week summer term. Full-time is 12 credit hours during any term, and academic year is defined as 30 weeks and 24 hours or 24 semester hours. Allison will live off campus and her EFC is a 0. So just breaking it down a little bit more so you can see the enrollment side. And I think this is important, as you're kind of looking at students and if you're trying to figure them out, again, your student information system, your SIS, a lot of times will generate a lot of this information for you based off of what the registrar's office has in. But again, I think it's helpful, to kind of look at these different scenarios and kind of write it down, make your little cheat sheets like Janet said, and just make sure that you're understanding, what they're kind of saying here. And obviously what we do, we don't always spell it out, but it's a big plus to kind of just have it so then you can understand it at your fingertips. But so based off of her enrollment fall of 2021, Allison will have 14 credit hours and she will be considered a full-time status as per the registrar's office. In spring of 2022, she will take 6 credit hours, which is considered half-time as per the registrar's office. And then summer 22, she'll have 4 credit hours, which is less than half-time then. So Allison did not enroll during summer 21 and has never been enrolled less than half-time before the summer of 2022 term. So now we're looking at the cost of attendance. That's again, kind of reiterating what a lot what Janet said, how do we break our way through this, right? You got to have the cost of attendance first for Allison. So, just showing you this really quick, has her tuition and fees, has her books and supplies, has her room and board, transportation, and the miscellaneous personal expenses. So the total cost. So right off the bat, looking at this one, as Janet pulled up that graph for you guys before with the Pell distributions, you already know that it's already above that maximum Pell award. So right now, you're going all the way to the bottom left-hand side, and then you're just finding that 0 EFC based off of what they told us so far. And that's how we can start figuring out, what exactly, is going on here, just so we can see what her Pell grant be and everything like that. So exercise A, you calculate Allison's federal Pell Grant for full-time enrollment for the fall and spring 2020 semester. You can calculate Allison's, for exercise B, you can calculate Allison's federal Pell Grant payment if she enrolls half-time for the spring of 2022, which again, we saw that in that graph. Exercise C, you calculate Allison's federal Pell Grant if she enrolls in less than half-time 4 credits for the summer of 2022. And then exercise D, you complete the remaining eligibility worksheet to determine remaining eligibility for the federal Pell Grant or the Iraq-Afghanistan Service Grant, which we dispersed before 10/1 of 2021. So just looking at this really quick, and this is what I always kind of say is if you guys, kind of look at and see what we can actually do, just kind of look at calculating it for the full-time enrollment and then the spring of 2022. So you determine the enrollment status. So, looking at this, we knew in the fall of 2021, you had to breakly calculate it out. So I'm going to just show you some of the things here, and we're just going to go over those numbers. So again, student was full-time. Calculating for Pell and SEOG, the cost of attendance, we know that it was at $9,860. So that award amount was the maximum Pell. Maximum Pell for this is $6,495. And we do it, as Janet said too, you have to do it you can't give it all up front, right? So we know that typically we do fall, spring is kind of your traditional. So you're doing 2 payments right now. and you're calculating the payments per, so it's half of that actual award. So now this is for the spring of 2022 if she enrolls half-time. So half-time, same cost of attendance, the determination. So this would be then if you're doing for the full academic year, what that award would look like, that part-time award. And then you're dividing it by 2. So then just in her spring of 2022 semester, her Pell Grant would be the $1,624 then. So again, just kind of showing you the bigger breakdown. You know, you can't just always keep that overall amount and then kind of do it from that way. You know, it kind of shows you. And again, I know we're a colleague school, and even on our graph, we have a graph above like our awarding screen that actually shows these different changes in that as well. So again, just gives you a kind of an illustration of that as well. All right, and then this is for the 4 credits for the summer of 2022. So less than halftime. So the less than halftime award, again, you know, going off the same cost of attendance, determining that award amount, then dividing it by 2, gives you the 812 then for the calculated payment for just that summer of 22 with the 4 credits. And then, like we said, we talked about in the exercise D that we're going to find out what that remaining eligibility is now for the IASG grant. So you have your schedule award, you have to take out, like Janet said on that graph, that you can kind of see, you have to take out the 5.7% right off the top because that's just what actually comes off of it. But based off this, not the first disbursement, you don't have to on this one. You minus all the other disbursements for the academic year, which you can see there's the 5,681, and your remaining eligibility is 811. So again, you know, kind of breaks it down. I think this isn't a perfect world. And people that work Pell will know that, you know, it is not this hard. I can tell you a lot of times it's really kind of self-explanatory and it really walks you through it. And again, our software nowadays just makes our jobs with Pell, the Pell program, so much more easy than it ever has been before. All right, moving right along. So the Formula 2. So again, you know, Janet talked about Formula 1. We're going to go all the way through really Formula 5 here. So it's your program structure, same as Formula 1, except it's less than the 30 weeks. There is no ED waiver of the 30-week minimum, and the cost of attendance and payments for a payment period must be prorated. That's one big thing that you have to remember with Formula 2. And then again, just have a little thing here for the self-guided part. You want to find out more information for Formula 2. Just gives you a lot more information whenever it actually comes down to it. The other big thing is prorate the payments for each payment period by adjusting the annual award based on the weeks in which the academic year. So looking at it overall, you're looking at your weeks in the fall and spring terms, and then you're dividing that by the weeks in the academic year. And then you times it by the award amount. And then you divide that overall by the terms in the academic year. So this is really a little bit more convoluted in a sense. But again, kind of gives you a general overview what that Formula 2 kind of looks like, just based off of not your kind of standardized weeks. Your Formula 3 may be used for all term-based credit hours if programs, except must use Formula 3 in credit hour program and non-standard terms. Use regulatory formulas to determine enrollment status. So you prorate the cost of attendance if the program is greater than 30 weeks. Prorate payments for payment period. And then again, you want to refer to just the study guide for more information on the third one here. A big emphasis though on Formula 3 can be used for any term-based credit hour program and must be used for any non-standardized credit hour program. So that's something that differentiates this from the rest of them. You really want to make sure that if it's just that program that you're kind of looking for, it kind of is self-explanatory there for you. All right. So moving on to lesson 3. So selecting the appropriate formula for clock hour and non-term credit hour programs. So all non-term credit hour programs, you want to use the fourth formula for all credit hour programs the same way as well. Again, I don't know if any of the schools out there, if you just want to use the chat box, use credit hours or clock hour programs. Usually we don't. Usually I remember, you know, just getting a pull from a lot of the students that attend on Raley. We usually don't have too many. Okay. No, and that's okay. And again, I think it's important for us to kind of understand it, but not that we have to be the jack of all trades, whenever it's kind of looking at all these things. But you always want to use the full-time payment schedule. You want to prorate the cost of attendance. You want to prorate payments for the payment period, and you want to use a separate session will be offered, wishing to review. And again, Melissa even mentioned that if this is something that your school does do and you just didn't share right now, we can definitely find people that this is what they do on a daily basis and make things a whole lot easier. So we would direct you right to the professionals whenever it comes to this side. I know I've never used Formula 4 in that as well, so we want to make sure that you get the best advice always through it. All right, so now Formula 5. So it applies to non-residential proration of program, 2 formula versions, non-term correspondence program and the term-based correspondence program. Again, you're going to prorate the cost of attendance. You're also seeing, the standard, always, with the other ones outside of Formula 1, you're always seeing proration of cost of attendance. You're seeing all that all the way through. So you see that there's that consistency just because there's more that goes into these and a lot more calculations that go into these than just really your standard formula, which is a lot of times just Formula 1. So additional considerations. So, different topics, again, year-round Pell, crossover payment period, summer having mini sessions or modules, determining a transfer student's remaining eligibility, waiver to reduce academic year, or requirements for calculating awards. So these are all little things that we're going to touch upon really here as in the 4th lesson. So reducing the academic year, schools may apply for a waiver to reduce the academic year to 26 through 29 weeks, 2-year associate degrees programs or a 4-year bachelor's degree program, not a clock hour program. This is something that some of your schools may have been part of last year, especially with COVID. There were some schools that were really trying to pull back how many weeks that they were being in the classroom, or they weren't giving you the standardized breaks either that we kind of had, your winter break or your spring break they usually give. So these are the things that kind of may have worked out, that you had to look at, a little bit closer. If granted, the standardized term credit hour Formula 1 or Formula 3 is used, and then non-term credit hour Formula 4 would be used, if not a clock hour program. So your eligibility for year-round Pell, again, goes back to the LEUs, is one of the big things. Students may qualify for more than one SA in one one award year, must be enrolled at least half-time during the SA, and all funds received are included in the student's LEU. So again, you want to make sure you're looking at that. I know I mentioned quickly yesterday in one of my presentations that, you have your variance reports or your POP reports. Again, these are the kind of things that come out of looking at Pell and making sure, that there's not double dipping or the double enrollment, that kind of Janet alluded to in that as well during her presentation. Recalculation policies remain unchanged, and provisions apply to clock hour and non-standardized credit hour programs as well. Crossover payment periods. So schools select the award year to pay Title IV aid funds during a crossover payment period. Again, you can kind of see, this may be your all year round Pell. It's always a school's option to assign how it will actually be kind of paid out for the Pell Grant and the IASG purposes as well. So again, you don't really see this too often, but something, again, we wanted to kind of just introduce to you just so you have a little bit more knowledge, as you're going through it. Summer modules. So if you combine into a single term, which I know a lot of schools are doing this now, especially for their summer terms, students need not to enroll in each module, but certain ones, maybe the first, and if they offer 3 modules, a start, a middle, and an end, those are the types of things. You want to build your cost of attendance, including costs only for the attended modules. You don't want to have a standardized cost of attendance you're giving these summer students, because their books could be different. All those different aspects could definitely be a big change. And then enrollment status is based on projected credit hours for all modules. May need to recalculate for enrollment status changes and to recover funds overpaid. This is really, really important. Summer is kind of like that I always joke with my staff, I call it like the loose cannon, because there's so much that kind of happens, and there's not, summer is one of those times that most staff take, a lot of their vacation time. So there's not the best communication always in the summer too. So you really want to stay on top of, if you're doing the Pell Awards to students, you want to make sure you're keeping on top of them, making sure that they're keeping their credit load of what they told you, especially if they're in these multiple modulars, multiple modulars. So then you can kind of keep track of that as well. All right, so we're going to use the chat box for this. An institution with clock hour programs may request a waiver of 26-week minimum academic year length. Is that true or false?
Lots of true.
Make sure everyone's reading the question over again. Remember, the key word here is clock hour programs.
We have one false.
Okay, so looking back, a big thing again, there is the opportunity you could have a waiver for it. But the problem is whenever it's clock hour, it's not really going by your standardized week minimums. So that's why this one would actually be false. It's kind of asking, it's kind of a trick question, I think, but it's asking, basically two different separate things. Throw these tricky ones at you every once in a while. All right, next one. To qualify to receive more than 150% of the SA, an otherwise eligible student must be enrolled blank during the additional payment period. So I would say just do A, B, or C in the chat box here. A would be full-time, B would be at least half-time, and C for at least 1 credit or credit clock hour. S and some B's, B, C. That's good. Yeah, I see a majority of B's out there. You guys are right. B's take it. You have to have at least half-time. Good job, everyone. All right, so transfer students. So transfer students, I know I kind of alluded to transfer students a little bit more yesterday as well. A little bit more convoluted in a sense whenever they're coming to your institution, especially whenever it comes to the Pell and making sure that things are consistent with you. So your Pell or ISG disbursements, the same award year cannot exceed the scheduled award or the LEU. Again, this is something that would come up. I don't think we really spelled out here for you, but this could be the POP award. Your student could have gone to school X, and maybe they didn't do the official withdrawal from school X, but now they're physically at your school. You put your Pell award, you send it to COD, they put their Pell award in, send it to COD because they didn't get, a roster to say that student isn't at the school anymore. You run your report and automatically it's saying that there's a POP. It says, why are you taking, the Pell whenever the host school, because they were out there the first semester, was taking it. So that's whenever you have to actually physically reach out to those schools and just say, hey, Johnny Smith's at my school now, so you guys have to return yours, and vice versa. So it's usually pretty easy. You don't usually see a ton of them, but you do see that, for students that don't do the official withdrawal process or anything like that, that's a big one. Another big one is.
Hey, Jared, excuse me for interrupting, but when we say you, a lot of times this may not be anything you ever do. This might be your systems person that does this.
Yep.
So a lot of this stuff is just familiarizing you. As a financial aid counselor, you probably have systems people that are going to do certain kind of jobs, but it's just important for us to know things they do. And I know at Pitt here, our systems team even took some financial aid counseling so that they understand financial aid as well, because financial aid is kind of like a foreign language, admissions, registration, credits, all those kind of things. Those are kind of standard terms, but that's nebulous. People, you know what I mean? So it can just be a little bit confusing. So I just don't want you to think that you're going to go back to your office and probably have to do all these things, but just so you know how the whole puzzle works. It's important. So sorry about that, Jared.
No, that's okay. No, and it's right. It all depends on how your office is structured too. Like as Melissa's saying, I can tell you that I do all of our reports for variance. I don't run our Pell program actually, but I do all the reports for it. And then I look them over and everything like that. And then I work with our Pell representative to actually do that. So it really is, again, just something for your office. And that's a great question to go back with and see, how does your office handle it? Just not for you to handle it, but just so you have clarity, as you're going through this though too, in case something you can ever take on if you're really interested in that as well. You're going to review the school's schedule award and amount dispersed, and then you're going to do the scheduled award and payment periods may differ again at each school depending on cost, right? We talked about the cost of attendance being really that driver whenever it comes to on the chart. So depending on, did they come from a community college, it could have been a lot less, and were they maybe only half time there, and now they're coming to your school and they're full time. So again, you want to look at these different details, to make sure you're helping the student the best you can. You're going to determine the percentage of prior SA received from a prior school. Subtract the percentage from the appropriate percentage to determine the percentage remaining for use at your current school. And then you're going to multiply the percentage remaining by the current SA. And I know that can kind of sound a little bit confusing, but we have a couple examples here just so you can kind of understand a little bit better. It does get a little bit more confusing, and it's not just an easy formula here. So first we're going to look at Malia's schedule award and payment schedule differ at each school again. So her total schedule award was supposed to be the 3,645. So her fall award was going to be 1,215, winter award 1,215, and then spring was nothing. So she used 67% of her scheduled award. So again, you could have up to 150%. So you're minusing that 67%. So right now, she still has 83% of her eligibility for that spring semester. At new school, that schedule award should be $2,600. So you have to use, again, as Janet mentioned before, which is an important thing, you have to use half and half really whenever you're looking at these terms. So 50% of that award would be $1,300 and that they would be using for the spring semester. So that's Malia's. Amy's payment schedule are the same at both schools. So a little bit different here. So again, they're both $4,145. For the summer, the student got $2,073 and nothing for the fall. So they use 50% of that eligibility in the summer fall. So again, you have 150%, you have 100% still remaining. So in that fall semester, the student can use 1,382, winter 1,381, and spring 1,382. So again, brings you up to that 100%. And the student here used the whole 150% eligibility because they went summer, fall, winter, spring. Kyler attended the fall term at both schools. So the schedule award, 0%, remaining percent, and then remaining award and everything like that then too. So again, you can see that it's really a little bit different, whenever you're looking at that. You can't have any overlap in enrollment, students' eligibility for Pell at both schools, and again, you can't exceed that 150% as well. All right, moving into recalculating a federal Pell Grant or the IASG. So schools establish and follow their policies. Recalculation is required for federal Pell Grant if the EFC changes as a result of verification, updates, corrections, or professional judgment adjustments, or not recalculating would result in exceeding maximum eligibility for the award year, which is really, really important. You want to make sure, again, you're mindful of that. And Melissa said, this might not be something you really come across, but you're processing people on the back end. They may get a new ICER in, and it can change things, as these things are happening. Required for federal Pell Grants or IASG for term-based credit hour programs, if actual or projected enrollment status changes between terms in the same award year or during the payment period before the student begins attendance in all classes originally scheduled for the payment period. And then the enrollment status covers all only the classes the student actually began attending, which is really important. Again, you want to stay on top of it. You want to make sure that what you're putting those awards on, because we don't put them on right before the classes start a lot of times. Usually we're working ahead. That's, you want to make sure that their credits are staying in line as they go through it. One other big tip that I will say is you know, if you end up taking over Pell or you're doing Pell at your schools, a lot of the programs that are out there, the SISs, they actually can build in these parts of it now. So it will actually check the student's eligibility based off of credits. So if you have a full-time eligibility on for that student and then they come in as like half-time, there can actually be criteria set up so that that award doesn't go on the student's account and bounces back to you. So again, just another check and balances. I know I've done a lot of stuff like that to try to streamline our processes in our campus. So again, just something to kind of help you out. And then the optional for federal Pell Grant or IASG, if enrollment status changes within a payment period after beginning attendance in all classes for which the student has registered and receiving payment, or the cost of attendance changes, but not as the result of a change in enrollment status. And then no recalculation, and then recalculation unnecessary for clock hours and non-term programs as well. I'm sorry, for the top there too, optional for Pell Grant is just sort of a continue on. All enrollment status changes, both increases and decreases that occur during the term, and only changes up to a specific date, such as census date, which I know we talked about in past presentations, or the Pell recalculation date within a payment period as well. All right, so next quiz question we have. A transfer student may receive federal Pell Grant or IASG that exceeds 150% of the student award. Is that true or false? Read it carefully. Okay, Lori. Good job. See a lot of falses coming through. Great job, everyone. That's right. All right, moving on to our next question. So select the recalculations that are optional. So the student's EFC changes as a result of verification, updating, correction of professional judgment, adjustments to applicant data, or only for changes that occur up to a specific date, such as a census date within a payment period, or actually or projected enrollment changes between terms in the same award year, or all changes in enrollment status, both increase and decrease, that occur throughout the semester. There's two that could be here. B, yep. C, B. B is one of the correct answers. There's one more though, too. Nope, not A. Good try though. Remember, this one says optional. Jenny, you're right. It is D. Good job, B and D. Good job. Yep, 100%. So this one would be B and D because it's optional in the wording here. This is just some discussion questions. Feel free to take yourself off chat. I know that you guys have been sitting there a while without. We're almost done here. We have just a couple discussion questions, then we have another learning activity, and then we are going to be done, guys. So just the first question that I kind of just wanted to, kind of put out there just so we can talk a little bit more is, does your institution offer summer modules? And if so, does your institution combine the summer modules to form a standard term? Just take yourself off mute. You don't necessarily, if you feel more comfortable doing the chat, that's fine too. But
our institution does summer 1 and summer 2, which are 7-week periods, but for financial aid, it's just combined into one summer term.
Okay, good. Great. How about anyone else? Anybody else? No? Okay. We'll move on to the next one. How does your institution assign federal Pell Grant or IASG during a crossover period? Is there a standard policy your institution has? Does anyone do any crossover periods that they're aware of or anything like that? So that might be the bigger question. Is I'm not sure a lot of schools will have this, but. Okay. All right, we're gonna move on to the next question then, just because if we don't have it, not really gonna be a good discussion question. Does your school have a policy for optional recalculations, or does your school only complete required recalculations? Is there anything you would do differently? And if so, what would your change? So our newbies, I don't know that you guys would know this question just yet, you know, because you may not even had a chance to look at the policy and procedure handbooks at your schools, but
I think our school does optional ones, especially in terms of like appeals. Like we have forms for like parent reduced incomes where anything that's reported on the FAFSA may not be true.
Okay.
Like, so we use that to recalculate their cost of attendance sometimes. So I guess that would count as optional.
Sure. Great point. Everyone's quiet.
We also have the optional, we do both for recalc, because we have a lot of PJs. So we're doing a lot of recalculating. So I don't do it. I'm not in charge of it at Westchester, but we have two different Pell people.
Oh, okay, good. Great, thanks everyone. It's really good. All right, moving right along, we're gonna move into, like I said, our last learning activity. So we're gonna talk about David. So David is a transfer student. David enrolls full-time for the fall semester at a high-cost school and receives $1,073 of the $2,145 student award for the 2021-2022 award year. David then transfers to another school and enrolls full-time for the spring semester, where the cost of attendance is much lower. His schedule award at the new school is $1,400. What is David's remaining eligibility at the new school?
It would still be 1,073, right? Or is that not how it works?
No, roughly yes. Yes. So it breaks a little bit down further. So this gives you the remaining eligibility because of the new school, right? So you have a remaining dispersed at prior school. Then you're dividing it by the student award at the prior school. So they use 50%, right? So we talked about that 150% whenever they're coming through. So they have 100% left. So 100% of that new award, which we'll see on this next slide. And then you times it and you get 25% because he's determined if he enrolled half-time, he gets the 350, but because he's entitled to that, so he would get basically like 700 for the new fiscal year. He gets the 140 for the academic year, but really half of that would then be for that last semester, right? Unless you did, you know, the summer after that then too. So you're right. Does that make sense to everyone? Know that that can be kind of confusing sometimes.
I have a quick question for you.
Sure. Yeah.
So, when he goes to the new school, the scheduled award for the year is 1,400, right? Is that's for the whole like scheduled award? So wouldn't he get half of that because he's only there for the spring?
Right. So they're just showing you really the new award for the school. Instead of,
Oh, I got you.
like,
Okay.
you're 100% right. It should be half of that just for the spring. And then if
Right.
he plays summer, depending on credits, then maybe he would get that other 700, maybe not, you know?
Gotcha. Okay.
Great point. Good. Any other questions or anything like that? All right, well, thank you guys. You guys did awesome. I know that that was a lot of information. You know, whenever Jen and I were preparing this for you, we knew that it was going to be a lot. So we wanted to make sure that, you know, we're trying our best to try to dumb it down a little bit, but give you, you know, as much information that we think, you know, really going to be helpful to bring back to your school.